And because of such aversion to cultural fundamentalism in general, I mean, labeling anything fundamentalist, even if it's biblical, isn't there a kind of a danger in that, or would you say?
Yeah, there can be, and I'm not married to the term fundamentalist. It's not a biblical term, but when it was coined and used, it was attached to this idea of the fundamentals of the faith, and it was helpful. And the Curtis Lee Law is the one that came up with this idea and put it into his little newspaper. He said, we could use like conservative, but it's not specific enough. Premillennialism, but it's too narrow. And so, you try to find a good label. And what often happens is it gets perverted over time. Your enemies start to laden it with things. You even start to laden it with other things that you don't mean. So everybody has to have some kind of a label. And if we could come up with a better one that nobody would mess with, then we would use that one. But the reality is, it's got a good connotation historically. What has been added to it over time is the negative part. And so I suppose we don't have to use it, but I don't know of a better term that would help us to understand this is what it stands for. If we get to, like we need to do with most labels, if we get to determine the meaning for ourselves, what I mean by fundamentalist. And I think adding biblical onto it helps clarify that as well.
Yeah. So what are and you mentioned this before, about 5 to 7 core beliefs of a biblical fundamentalist. And you mentioned the virgin birth. What else would you hold to?
Yeah, I've got them listed here
sure.
for us. Inerrancy of Scripture. You could add infallibility as well, inerrancy and infallibility of Scripture. Virgin birth, the substitutionary atonement of Christ, his bodily resurrection, his physical bodily resurrection. And then those would be the main 5. Those were originally used by the Northern Presbyterians who became the PCUSA. And they were trying to get those that were being ordained to sign that they actually agreed with those things. And crazy enough, they couldn't get that to pass because liberalism had come into that denomination so powerfully that they actually would not even be willing to make their students that were going to be ordained sign that they agreed to those 5 things. When you look at other lists brought up by other groups, they would add on there the deity of Christ, and they would also add on there the second coming, the physical imminent return of Christ. I would agree to all 7 of those. I'd say all of those are pretty important for us as Christians, and it's mind-blowing that anyone would want to call themselves a Christian and deny any of those things. But they were called modernists. Later on, we called them liberals. Today, we call them progressives. All of those are the same thing. They're from the pit of hell, and all of them deny one or more aspects of those fundamentals. And we'd say, no, those are things worthy of fighting for. Those are worthy of dying for. Whatever the color of your carpet is, not worth it. The length of your hair doesn't matter to me. We're talking modesty and holiness and dress, absolutely. But the old lady with the ruler and the yardstick out there measuring the space between guys and girls and the lengths of dresses.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
To go back to the carpet issue, I would like to just go ahead and throw out there, we should have shag carpet, in the studio, as one of our fundamental beliefs, because I want to bring back shag.
Yeah, maybe that'd be the 8th
Of course, that would
fundamental.
mean something different in Europe, saying that.
Yeah. Causing church divides everywhere.
I mean, shag carpet, and
Yes.
I think it's good. So we can add that to there were 7, right? Maybe 8.
Well, then if I could jump in here, I would just say flat caps should not be a part of fundamentalism.
No. See, now you're getting legalistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one step too far. I'm hearing Richard talk.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you're asking about the difference between biblical and cultural fundamentalism. I'm hearing what you say. Would you agree with? It seems like whatever term we use, and we're stuck with these terms, much like dispensationalism, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter what the term is, because if there's a certain set of beliefs, our critics are just going to not like. It's the ideas they don't like when it comes down to not so much the term, even though these terms are usually given by our opponents to us.
Right.
Put that off to the shelf for a second. But it seems like with fundamentalism, what you're saying is that much like evangelicals, much like dispensationalism, it should be defined by according to a pattern of beliefs. Right? Actual beliefs, not by a specific person or a cultural fad or how it was received somewhere. But it seems like that's what would be a defining mark, and you put the biblical adjective before it. We're holding to a certain core pattern of beliefs. And if you hold to these core pattern of beliefs, whether you like the term or not, let's just call it fundamentalist, call it evangelical, call it something else.
Right.
But we're defining by a core pattern of set beliefs, right?
Yeah, and I think that, we have to recognize that the enemies of any idea often use terms to you as a club to harm people. Last year I remember I was at the the Ark encounter, and they have there this big arch, and the inside of the arch is painted with a rainbow, and oftentimes they'll light the whole side of the Ark up with a rainbow, and you can buy things in their little gift shop that says we're taking back the rainbow. The idea of the rainbow is a biblical idea. Obviously, it's not the same as fundamentalism, but they're refusing to give it over to the LGBTQIA plus movement. And instead, they're saying this belongs to God.
That's right.
And so in many ways, we have to just stop and say, well, they took evangelicalism and, they've taken all these other terms and things get twisted and moved. We just say, you know what, we're going to stop. This is where we're going to land. This has some historical value to us. And if we define our own terms and we can hold to it and say, we are fundamentalists in this way. The funny thing is, if you were to talk about a Muslim fundamentalist, Islamic fundamentalists are known for believing what the Quran says, and they believe it absolutely. And so you'll even have those that are Muslim in the United States say, well, I'm not an Islamic fundamentalist. I don't believe in those things. Well, we would say the same thing about Christian fundamentalists. I absolutely believe what this book says. I believe it wholeheartedly. I don't make adjustments. I don't let my lifestyle dictate really what I truly believe, and the book says that, but I don't really hold to that. Christian fundamentalists said, no, absolutely. We hold to the scripture. We believe what it says. And the mockery comes, the derision will come, and that's okay. But if that's what you mean by fundamentalist is that you're just a literalist, then absolutely, we are literalists.